Could I ask, please, where do you all go when you get discouraged? When you're discouraged, what will lift your heart up? What will put things in perspective? So for me, believe it or not, many of times when I come to Mass, I'll be very distracted, things will be bothering me. I know I might look very focused on the outside, and I'm really trying to be, but on the inside, there's a lot of stuff, preoccupations, and even worries, etc. But when I get to the words of consecration and I hear Jesus' words, usually this peace comes over me. So I get so much peace from Jesus' words. Jesus says today, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. So Jesus' words don't pass away for two reasons. One, the person who's speaking them is eternal. Jesus is eternal. And then the content of his words are eternal. So he's always speaking eternal truths. So when I hear Jesus' words during Mass, these words of the consecration, this is the chalice of my blood, the blood of the new and eternal covenant, which will be poured out for you. When I hear those words, I get this peace. And my perspective starts changing because my suffering has value, because my suffering is united to Jesus. And then my suffering has meaning. And it's normal, right? Because love involves self-giving, and self-giving really hurts. So that explains my suffering. And slowly, I just feel much, much better. So when I hear these words of Jesus during the Mass, I hear words of love. Do you all hear words of love during the Mass? Now let me explain what I mean. I once looked up on Google most memorable death scenes in movies. Now I wasn't trying to be like morbid. I was just trying to find out what would be the most one that's kind of similar to Christ. So it gave a top 10, and one of them is from Star Trek II. And the beautiful scene is where Spock sacrifices his life for his crewmates. Now, this is so beautiful because this character, who is supposed to show no emotions, he doesn't say to his crewmates, I love you, but what he does is with his words and his actions, he says that he loves them. So his famous words to Kirk, he says, I have been and always shall be your friend. Those are words of love. And now in the Bible, these are what we call covenantal words. So Jesus speaks about the covenant. Now a covenant is where you make a new relationship. We've talked about the difference before between a contract and a covenant. A contract is where you exchange goods and services. A covenant is where you build a new family relationship, like in adoption or a marriage. So when we hear Jesus' words during Mass, we remember, oh, he's making us part of his family. And that family is eternal. He'll never let us go. So we're going to come back to this point in a minute. Now, when we look at the context for today's gospel, Jesus uses these apocalyptic images to describe the end of the world. So he says, in those days, after the time of suffering, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will be falling from heaven. Okay, so he's describing the end of the world. But these words also symbolically describe when our lives fall apart, or when they feel like they're falling apart. Now, right after these words, this is what Jesus says, and these words are more important. He says, then they will see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory. So what do our minds focus on, like the world ending or Jesus? So Pope Benedict XVI said about these words, he says, Jesus is the true event which remains the firm and enduring point in the midst of the world's upheavals. So I'll read that again. Jesus is the true event which remains the firm and enduring point in the midst of the world's upheavals. And so the temptation is when we're suffering, we focus on all the disasters going on in our lives, and we don't focus enough on Jesus. So we have to confront our problems, but you have to do it united to Jesus from that place of peace. Okay, so let's go back to these covenantal words. So think about this. Why does it hurt so much when we're dating and then we break up? Now, if you haven't been dating for a while, think back. Think back to a long time ago. Why is it when we're dating and then break up, it hurts so much? Why do we keep on thinking about it? Because you had a relationship that was supposed to become a covenant marriage, then it's over. That kills. Same thing. Think about big arguments in our families. Whenever there are big arguments between spouses, the covenant is being attacked, the marriage. Or when there's this big argument between us and our parents, or us and our children, God designed us to flourish in covenants. And so when those arguments happen, this is not what Jesus wants. Now, this is the exact same reason why during the Mass, when we get to the words of consecration, we hear that stable relationship. Jesus says, "Take this, all of you, and eat of it, for this is my body, which is given up for you." So even if all our relationships in our life are in trouble, this relationship is always firm. And when I think about these words more and more after I hear them during Mass, again, my heart starts changing. And then again, this peace comes over me. Now, let me give you another movie reference. I haven't quoted movies in a long time, so allow me to quote two today. One of the underlying themes in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is Tony Stark's relationship with his father. It's strained, and Tony does not feel that his father loves him. So in the last movie in which he appears, Avengers Endgame, Tony goes back in time and he meets his father. And his father, at that moment in history, his wife is pregnant with Tony. And then the father says these beautiful words. He says, "I tell you, this kid is not even here yet there's nothing I wouldn't do for him." Those are covenantal words. And that's why Tony gives them this hug. It's so meaningful for him. So Jesus' words are eternal. They're fresh every day. Jesus keeps on speaking words of love to us, and it's really important that we learn to relish them, just appreciate them over and over again. So it's like when you're having a bad day, someone sends you a beautiful text or an email. You notice that when you get a beautiful text or email, you read it again and again? Because it means so much. Now, when you read it again and again, what you're doing is you're relishing, to use that word, you're relishing the beautiful truth in it. We have to learn to do that during Mass. When we get to the words, the prayers of the Mass, you have to learn to relish them, think them over and over again until they go from the head until the heart. The most important prayer during the Mass is what we call the Eucharistic prayer. It's a long prayer. Now it starts officially when the priest stands at the altar and he says, "The Lord be with you and with your spirit." And that prayer goes all the way until just the Our Father. That's the Eucharistic prayer. That's the most important. So what happens is the priest prays on our behalf. And how do we participate? We participate silently by relishing those words, thinking about them over and over again and appreciating them. And it changes us. When someone says to us, "I love you," when they speak those words, they are hoping that we will use the words, "I love you too." And when Jesus has made us the center of his life, he is hoping that we eventually will make him the center of our life. So for a few months now, we've been getting ready for next week. Next week is our Christ the King Challenge, and we always ask 3 questions. 1, put up your hand if you've made Jesus the center of your life. The second question, if he's not the center of your life, do you want him to be? And then 3, if you've made him the center of your life, have you done so for the first time in the past 12 months? Now remember, when we ask this question next week, you can't say, "I think he's the center of my life." That's not allowed. Okay, because this choice is like a marriage. You're either married or you're not. So if I ask you, "Hey, are you married?" You wouldn't say, "I think so." You should know, because it's a choice. And that choice is a lifelong covenant. Now, all of us who are baptized, we're already in that covenant, but we haven't yet made it a conscious choice. And so when we get to that moment, we make that choice, it's like a marriage. Doesn't mean we have a good marriage with Jesus, but he is faithful and he will make the spiritual marriage stronger. So, whenever we're discouraged, focus on Jesus' covenantal words. We're going to end now with a 2-minute video from the movie The Passion of the Christ, and this clip compiles all the scenes when Jesus is at the Last Supper. And what we want to pay attention to is that all of his words and actions, his gestures, communicate that he loves us perfectly. And those words will never pass away.
Kabilule, wa okulu, tenau kishmi, dilukomi hiv. Kabilu, steu, tenadami, de breitha chadatha, di hivlukom wathrabin di mashlech chatayin. Havata rabata nash yavech ayochi lehom. Ai la kaltum lem hakti na seltumma. Bila thil komara hem haki hita. Hita hivo denale dena. Kokavel dena avef lekom. Antun. Hivo lekom. Antun maha amanin bi. Watinda wundi ehwe ana archa. Koste. Chaya.